Hello, Hockey World. It is Thursday, May 1st, 2025.
Hi, I'm Kevin Allen from Detroit Hockey Now.
And I am Eklund, and you're watching the Hockey Buzzcast on hockeybuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes to you from different places. Today, I am in what I'm going to call the rumor mill room. So this is where I have not in the studio because we're going to talk about fun things today. Today's a casual day because I know it's not. We're going to make this a casual day for everyone. But there are 4 Game 6s tonight, one of which is Toronto, Ottawa, which we'll get to. But yeah, so there is so much to talk about. There's so much going on, and we'll talk about that too. We'll go into the Game 6s. I think we're going to get into the series real quick, Kevin. I think we have to, but then we're going to get on with it. Washington, Carolina, move on. Pretty much what you thought.
Yeah, for sure. I think Carolina was sort of unimpressive this season. They weren't the team that I thought they would be. I mean, even though their record says they were a very good team, I saw a lot of things that told me they weren't as good as they've been in the past, like their defense, which is still formidable, but it's just not as strong as it once was. It's good enough to get by. And, even though they have Sebastian Aho leading what should be a very good offense, there were times when they struggled to score goals. That's why they went out and got, Rantanen. But, here we are. We moved along, and they're where they should be. So maybe
it's going to be a good series. Yeah.
So, and then the Capitals, I still think they're riding the crest of the wave that was created by Ovechkin's chase of Gretzky. And, I really like those kind of organic situations that happen that, so the teams take advantage of just, automatically and, play better than they really, I think Capitals have played this season better than the roster suggests. I mean, you look at Strom having the kind of season he had, his arguably his best season. Well, that's all part and parcel of what's been going on with that team. Everybody's just excited to be around, an incredible chase. So, I think this first, with, some exceptions, I think this first round has gone the way that I thought it would. I certainly didn't see the challenge that the Minnesota Wild.
That's something, right? And that's going to be fascinating. And Dallas, up 3-2. That's going to be fascinating, right? So to me,
but Dallas is a team I've always, liked. I just think they were a little beat up. The Heiskanen injury I thought was going to be particularly devastating on them. He's such a efficient defenseman. Like I see him as similar to a younger, young Nicholas Lidstrom, not the Lidstrom who was so effective as he got older, but the one who was just sort of learning to be the player he ended up to be. And that's where Heiskanen is still very effective. But boy, I think he's even going to be greater. I think he's going to be, Nicholas Lidstrom-esque.
He has that in him, and there are moments when you would swear he was almost there, so it's where he's there, so
And the Oilers Kings series, not everybody has believed in the Oilers because rightfully so, they've questioned their goaltending. But I just felt all along at some point, when you have two players of Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl's ilk, that they just rise above. And we can talk about defense and goaltending, and we know the importance of that. You and I have watched the playoffs for too many decades, and we understand the importance of all that. But given the choice, I'd rather have the two of the top 5 players in the world, on my team. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to win because we've proven that that's certainly the case. They have not been able to get it together. But in this series, I think it's still theirs to take if they can get it done.
I think so too. And so tonight's Game 6 is the one thing I just want to focus on the overall thought here, because obviously Toronto is terrified. And Giroux went through this and came back from 3-0 with the Flyers against the Bruins, which was really bizarre because there are so many similarities to that comeback to this. Because I was looking at this, so the Flyers lost game for first three games of the series, right? And that was, we all knew that. and Game 4 went to overtime, which it did, like in this series too. And the Flyers, Simone Gagne scored to send it to Game 5, where we have the goal the other night by, I guess, Brady Tkachuk scored, send it to, or whoever scored the winning goal to send it to Game 5. Game 6 in that Flyers series, which went back to Boston. Boston just like didn't show up, which you saw in Game 6, which back in Toronto, they didn't show up. So it's really following the same kind of things. I always say that if a team's going to win, the biggest thing to me is Game 6 in this come from three down thing, because if they come from 3 down, that obviously means they won Game 4, right? So Game 5 is the big game, because Game 5 is usually home, because it's usually the better team that was ahead. And that's usually the game where that team's ahead, but they know they can still lose a couple games. The team coming in is completely relaxed. And that's where teams tend to screw it up. Game 5 is the worst thing, because,
Yeah, I mean, to me, what this comes down to is which is the greater force. The Toronto Maple Leafs will screw it up in the postseason, or the Tkachuk factor for the Ottawa Senators. I mean, I think we believe certainly that the 67 cloud hanging over the Maple Leafs. It does have an impact. It shouldn't, past performances
doesn't make any sense, right?
It shouldn't have any impact, but past performance shouldn't impact future occurrences. On the other hand, it gets talked about so much in Toronto and in the media and among the fan base that, you can't help but not think about it. And you plant that seed of doubt in your head, and then you think, I'll dismiss it. It's, it has nothing to do with us. This is a different team, but it does. It's heavy. It weighs heavily on it.
It's just like, if someone told you, if you're carrying a hot bowl of soup and like 30,000 people around you and told you don't drop that bowl of soup when you're walking in the living room. You'd be like, okay, I won't drop a bowl of soup. I'm walking in the living room. But if they tell it to you every day, and you have to, and then eventually the day comes where you have to grab that bowl of soup, you're dropping it in the living room. It's just, and that's really what's happening, right? So, I mean, most of these players' parents weren't alive when the Leafs won a Stanley Cup, and that's how far back we're going, So,
yeah, I mean, I think that's a great analogy. It's you're walking across a 3-foot wide bridge over a 10,000-foot drop cavern, and even though 3 feet should be plenty of space for you to get across, every step you take, you're going to think about how scary that fall is. And
it's the truth.
I think that's what we see. But I think the other thing you have to consider here is there is a Tkachuk factor. Even though Brady has not won, his brother has. And his dad certainly has lots of history of, including, in Quebec, where he helped USA. It was in Montreal, but he helped the Americans. Speaking, of course, of Keith Tkachuk, helped the Americans win the 1996, World Cup. And I think the Tkachuk brothers and the sons of Keith, I think they believe in their ability to rally their troops, and they get fired up for big games. They play big in big games, just like their dad did. And I think because of that, you got to worry a little bit, But I don't know. It feels like the right time for the Maple Leafs to get past all this.
It does.
They're a really good team. They have a lot of firepower. Their defense is better now than it's been. So you got to hope that they'll at least see their best performance out of them, if nothing else.
Think so, and I mean, I did sense for the first time ever in the playoffs, when I was reading Leaf fans' comments, that there was a cockiness, which was really funny, because like after Game 3, when they were up 3-0, I've never seen a cocky Leaf fan in the playoffs before, and it was just kind of surprising. And now that's all gone away again. So yeah, I'm with you. I mean, the other series that actually really mirrors this quite a bit is Edmonton and LA, because Edmonton's owned them in so many years now, and this year it just looked like this was going to be LA's year. I mean, those first couple games, this is definitely LA's year.
Yeah, well, I mean, just as I said, I think we have so many maxims in the NHL about
Yep.
your best players. Your best players have to be your best players. Your best players always have to step up.
Yep.
I think that's what this, comes down to. And, the Edmonton Oilers, still have, as hard as it is to believe, a much better history of postseason that they can draw on than the Kings do. I don't think there's, kind of any question about that. There's a lot of banners hanging in Edmonton. There's a lot of great history there.
You see the wall of Stanley Cups that you see in there?
Yeah. So
like full-size Stanley Cups. It's like they have a wall of them.
And none of that should matter, as we just said, but it does seem to. And everything, and the Kings this year were really good defensively, and they got really good goaltending all season long. But it's a different season now. We're playing with more on the line, and you knew coming in it was going to be close.
And, I know, and it has been that. It's been the most entertaining series, I think. It's just like hands down.
Yeah.
That's just, it's just fun. If you're not involved in it, it's fun. Like if you're involved in it, you've got to have no fingernails left. But if you're not involved with it, it's fun. And I'm just going to spitball my analogy a little bit further because I just thought of something that absolutely does make sense here. Let's change a bowl of soup to a cup of coffee, okay? Because everybody's carried a cup of coffee across a room that's hot. Do you know the best way to carry a cup of coffee across a room that's hot? Like, what would you do? Did you carry it?
I actually have no history with coffee.
Anything hot, or anything full, like anything full that you have.
Anything full, anything that I'm worried about spilling over the side, I don't fill up to the top.
Okay, so you don't fill up the top. So you're playing cautious there. It's fine.
Yep, I am.
And someone told me this a long time ago, and it absolutely works because I was a waiter for a while, right? And someone told me this in waitering. If you have something, if you're carrying a whole tray of things or whatever, and you look at it, you're going to be shaky and you're going to walk. But if you don't look at what you're carrying and look straight ahead, nothing will ever spill. It's the weirdest thing in the world, and it absolutely works. You'll see this. You try it sometime. Just anybody out there, just like pull a glass of water up all the way to the top, and just walk across the room looking straight ahead, and you won't spill it. So I don't know how this works, but in a way, there's a metaphor there for these hockey games. Like they can't just look at this game; they just got to be themselves and go.
Yeah.
The second you start looking at it, you start questioning yourself, and you start adjusting yourself and making it's going this way. I'm going to go this way a little bit. This, you know what I mean? You just got to be, and that works in that situation. It really does. Anyway.
Yeah. And again, we have almost too many things we say about playoff games. I just happened to go to this week an AHL playoff game for the Red Wings farm team, the Grand Rapids Griffins, and they turned in an abysmal performance, lackluster. They lost 4-0 to the Texas Stars, and here's the problem. I mean, what do you always say after you perform like that? You just can't wait to get at it. You hope you're playing the next day.
Right.
They don't play for another 6 days because of building availability. So what do you tell your troops then? Go home crazy. And mull this over and think about it for 6 days.
How many times have we even talked about like one extra day and what that does for a series, right? Like it's just like, who like if Game 7 is delayed 3 days, what does it do? What does it mean for people? Does it help?
I think there's a lot to be said, and it's been my observation for covering the playoffs as long as I have. That there's a lot to be said for the momentum of a rhythm. Less so now because of television, but in the old days, you played every other day.
Yeah.
And I always thought it was the greatest thing for goalies.
Yeah.
They play a game, they get the next day off, they don't even practice. Then the following day they get back in the net and they go. And you saw so many goalies they would get on a roll. Yeah. And I think that's why we've, through the years used to see, goalies who were not, unbelievable goalies. I think about Casey with the Minnesota North Stars years ago. And, this is how not famous he was. I can't even remember the Finnish goalie and the Blackhawks.
Niemi
as well. I mean, we've had history of I mean, they're NHL goalies, so they're quality goalies, but
Right.
not stars.
Right.
Finding their way to success in the postseason, and I thought a lot of that would come from the fact that there'd be a consistency and a rhythm that they would get themselves in, and you can say confidence as well, but it felt more almost like it was more of a rhythm than confidence.
I feel like it's more rhythm than and I think and I think also from a fan's perspective, every other day is more healthy. Like I think like you lost you win the other night. You have one day to think about. You lose, you get through the next day, and then you're back at it. It's just like this kind of thing. It's fine. But yeah, I think that when fans have to wait 3 or so days, or 2 or 3 more days, it's terrible. So I want to switch to that for a second. But before I do, Steve in the chat room wants to say that Steve Yzerman appears very angry.
Well, I mean, I think that's based on his season-ending press conference, which occurred, more than a week after it normally would. I'm assuming he didn't, never complain, never explain. He didn't tell us why, but I'm assuming he went down to the under-18 World Championships that are in Texas this year, which makes it a little easier to get to. And the Red Wings, for the 9th consecutive year, will have a pick that's not in the bottom 16, which meant they would have been in the playoffs. So he was down there kind of surveying, some of the top players. But he had some testy responses when he was asked about Jake Wallman, who he paid the San Jose Sharks to get rid of. And then they moved him for a first-round pick. And if you look at Wallman's numbers in the postseason, the last time I looked, he was +6. Playing. He started out playing, less minutes than he was in the regular season.
Unfair to do that,
yeah, sure, it is, but that doesn't stop us. It's it may be unfair, but and I think he came in this year too. He had a statement, which he never does. He started out by kind of talking about things. He said that yes, he had talked about Larkin. Larkin kind of said that some of the players were kind of disappointed that Yzerman didn't do more at the trade deadline. Not saying this, but the implications is that he didn't have confidence in them, or or something like that. And Yzerman said, I've talked to him about that, and I'm not going to say what I told him about all that, but if he wants to tell you, he's more than welcome to do that. He's just not going to be, give away what was said in a private conversation. But it sort of has created. I wouldn't say it's a major discussion point among fans that there's a tension between Larkin and Yzerman, but some fans believe there might be. Like I've seen some stuff suggesting, well, would they trade Larkin? And the answer to that is no. And the other thing I would warn people and because we were all guilty of this, I like to take people back to the negotiations between Yzerman and Larkin that went a lot longer than people thought it would. You got to pay Larkin. He's a homegrown Michigan player. You got to pay him. We almost all of us had slotted him in. We knew where he fit on the scale. And we thought, he was going to be in that 9 plus range, and we had sort of figured it all out. But they didn't get there, at least not right away. At the end, they did get there, almost exactly where we all thought it was going to be. And people thought, Larkin is going to really be irritated by this. And, this is going to, not set a good tone for the relationship. Well, what we find out when the negotiations are over is that Larkin often, almost daily, would be in Yzerman's office, and he would explain to him why he was kind of drawing a hard line, and they had really honest, frank discussions.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, that's
and
players love that. Players love that.
There was less animosity than anybody imagined that there was. So I just bring that up to say, even though that some people are seeing this as a real negative. Like, I don't really think it is. I think that's just the relationship they have.
Mm-hmm.
I think they kind of trust each other, that they can say,
Sure.
look, I didn't like what you did.
Yeah.
Just like Todd McClellan called out Larkin when he wasn't playing well.
Yeah.
Like, he probably wouldn't do that if he
I'll do
didn't
that.
know Yzerman and Larkin's relationship was
Yeah.
a good one. So
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if Yzerman and Larkin, if there's anything going on, Larkin wouldn't be Larkin, a captain and a superstar, if he wasn't a little pissed off that they haven't made the playoffs in a while. Like, that's
I think that's fair, and I also think it's fair that Steve Yzerman is ticked off.
right,
Like,
exactly. So yeah,
he doesn't like to say anymore, and people are tired of hearing it.
yeah.
But it does take a long time to rebuild. Like, somehow we still have it on our head, and we're all guilty of this. We think rebuilds take 5 years, and not if you're through the draft. It doesn't. Like
right.
we've seen. Like, Yzerman has taken, 7 first round, picks.
Yeah.
And, he's got 4 of them on the team now, and he's got 3 others that are sort of waiting in the wings. He had 2 1 year, so I think he has 8. But anyway, and, it's still not enough. Like, they're still on the outside. So, which also goes to show you, and I think maybe that was if there has been a fault in the rebuild, is they have not placed enough emphasis or made too many mistakes with regard to the players they've signed rather than drafted. Like, Yzerman has drafted well. These are all good players he's bringing in the first round. But some of the guys he's drafted, like he brought in Alex DeBrincat, a win.
Yeah.
He brought in Patrick Kane, a win.
Yeah.
JT Compher, good hockey player, but hasn't been able to make an impact.
Right.
Pop, good hockey player, solid performer, but hasn't been able to make an impact.
Right.
Both those guys, too many years on them.
Right.
There are other players he's brought in. So, yeah, I think he's angry. The fan base is a little angry. Yzerman's a little angry. So it's probably all for the best, to be honest with you.
Yeah. I mean, I'm at one point in the offseason, I'm going to talk to some of my GM friends and ask them, how do you actually rebuild a team? Like, because there's no true way of doing it. But it absolutely it includes the draft for sure. But like you said, it has to include free agent signings that are good and strong. And it also has to include some luck on some things that, on some players that you either sign or trade or get pick up off of waivers or whatever, become that kind of stuff has to happen too.
Yeah. I think when you strip it down to the chassis, that's when it really takes, a lot longer.
Yeah.
And the Red Wings did that.
Yeah.
And they didn't then get the luck of being able to, get those real high picks. Like, they didn't win the lottery. They've never won the lottery. In fact, usually they've fallen backwards. And that creates conspiracy theories, and Gary Bettman hates us
all the time. Yeah.
All that. That's the first place we go whenever you have bad luck.
Well, in Philadelphia, I've nicknamed Patrick Kane the spawn of the satanic ping pong ball, Patrick Kane.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, to be honest with you, I think this season, this summer, like the first move that has to be made. In fact, I asked Yzerman this question, like, in the last year in particular, it took them a little bit longer to sign Kane.
Yeah.
And I think they can't afford to have that happen this year, because they've got $20-some million. They want to make a splash in free agency. So they got to get Kane done, so they know, because Kane's important. He carries. He's the only guy on the team that seems to be able to carry the puck into the zone and never lose it.
Yeah.
And so he's really crucial. And DeBrincat has played well since when Kane's with them. So they really need to get him, and then they'll know exactly how much money they have left to spend on free agents. Because he was asked directly. And the anger came out, but he was asked whether he was willing to spend $10 or $11 million on players, which means that there's no Dylan Larkin cap.
Right.
And he said, yeah, absolutely. In fact, that was the word he used. Absolutely, we're willing to spend $10 or $11 million. Now,
I've seen this before. You have to. Go ahead.
Yeah, but can you recruit? Because it's nice to say, yeah, we'll give Marner $10 or $11 million, but Marner is going to look at you and see a team that hasn't made the playoffs in 9 years.
Exactly.
And John Tavares would come in on a shorter term deal, and the Red Wings could use another center. Would they be interested? Well, probably, but. Yeah. Is John Tavares going to be in a rush at his age, 34, to come and play for a team that hasn't made the playoffs for 9 years? I think not. To me, their hope of getting a free agent rests in their ability, maybe someone like Sam Bennett. Okay. And I'm not convinced that Florida is not going to re-sign him. They're going to work at that.
It depends if he prices himself out in the playoffs here. I think that could happen.
Well, he might do that. And that's what the Red Wings are counting on. I think they could go in and he would fill two needs for them because they need scoring desperately, somebody to play either on the number 2 center or on Larkin's wing or both. But just as important, they need guys who are harder to play against. And there's no one or not many that play that's harder to play.
He's a very unique character. He's like the 4th or 5th best player on the Panthers.
Yeah.
Which is crazy because he would be the best player on the Flyers or the Red Wings or anything like that. It's just right away. Immediately.
Yeah. Or at least, in the top group. Yeah.
The top 2 or 3, right? So, yeah. I agree with you completely. That's a ridiculous thing. It's really tough. We'll move on to funny stories in a second after this one thought. But the one thing I've had with Yzerman that I don't know if, and you can tell me whether he's done this well. He always has let people marinate for a very long time, right? That's his thing. He in the AHL and everything like that, he lets people get their feet under them before jumping right to the NHL.
Yeah,
and I think that how long you had to do that 10 years ago, and how long you have to do that now is very different. I think that the players coming in now are better equipped, and I think they're better trained, and we're seeing them jump into the NHL all over the place quicker.
Yeah.
And I feel like he's been a little bit slow on the intake of that concept.
I think that's fair. Because I think in Detroit, I think both the media and the fans would have preferred to see players, although he was right on Marco Kasper. And Marco Kasper, he didn't bring him up. And then this season, Marco Kasper, has really made strides. And,
really great.
It wasn't like he didn't do some on-the-job training because he started out a little bit slow. Then he went to the wing with a move from center to wing to play on Larkin's line, and then he started to get better and better. And then, of course, they released the Kraken and put him in the second line as the center, and he's played well there. But what's lost on people is yes, he scored, and that was the big question ever since he's been drafted.
Right,
yeah, he's a good player. Yeah. We know he's a good player. We know he's going to play in the league, but can he score? The answer is yes. He can score, and he can do that.
That's good. But he just looks like a good player on ice. Like when you watch him, I called you up after watching that Red Wings game live that I saw, and I'm like, Kasper's a really good player. And this is early, and it's just because he has that look that he's going to be a great player. Like he has that.
Yeah, and here's the thing that's lost on people. He leads Red Wing forwards in hits.
That's incredible.
Like this guy's a rookie.
Yeah,
and he doesn't even know what he doesn't know. He's just trying to figure it out.
Yeah,
but he's got time to hit more people than anyone on the team except for Moritz Seider. So he's trying to figure it all out, but he's got time to hit people. He goes after it, and he goes to the net. He goes hard, to the net, and he's just a great teammate. Everyone likes him, and he speaks 3 languages. He's just an incredible.
That's awesome. Player. He seems that way. On the ice, I was just so impressed with his certain guys just have that it factor, and he has that. You can tell, and it's not developed yet fully. It's not at the speed fully, but it's gonna be there, and it's that really is nice. Now moving on to some fun stories, because I promised people that, because today is stressful for everybody, and I as a fan, this is about the time when you're like, come on already. The 2:00 in the afternoon, you're like 2:00 in the afternoon, you're like, when's 7:00 getting here? This is that's still 5 hours away, which feels horrific to everybody out there who's nervous about this. So Kevin and I, when we talk for years we always would go to breakfast at the Stanley Cup Finals and stuff like that, and I would hear these incredible stories. And I know a lot of Kevin's stories. I'm queuing on some of the ones I want you to tell. So,
well, good, because I've forgotten so what it is that I know. So you'll have
and
to
I've got a
cue
few,
me
but
up.
I've got a few. But you really have good ones. The first one, a certain goalie who was naked that you interviewed. That story.
Oh yeah, no, that was Ed Belfour. It was not during the playoffs, but
Right.
yeah, Ed Belfour is a bit eccentric. Definitely fits the bill of having some idiosyncrasies. And
Yeah.
Ed Belfour, everyone would always look for a way to get Ed Belfour to talk. He didn't like talking to the media very well, and I heard that he really loved muscle cars, and he had a collection of them.
Oh, really?
And it was he kept it in. He had an off-season home. I think it was Saginaw, Michigan, and
Okay.
that he had 7 or 8 of them there that he worked on in the off-season. And like these are 68 Dodge Coronet 440 engine, those type things. And so I asked him about it. He said, "Yeah, I'll talk about that." But after practice, he had this ritual. He had to do things that he'd prepared to play the next day. And so I went to talk to him immediately after games. He goes, so he said, "Come back in like 15 minutes." And I said, "Okay, I will." And so I came back, and now there were still players in the locker room, and he was there, but he said, I got to work on my stick. So can you wait like another 20 minutes? And he said, and then I'll talk to you, and then I'll stretch. So I did, and I waited. Now everybody's gone. So there's no one in the room, and I'm waiting outside the Blackhawks room, and I've, talked to some people and said goodbye to them, and I decided to go back in. And I do, and I go in, and I find Ed Belfour doing his stretching completely naked in the dressing room. And, now this is an exaggeration, but not by much. He seemed to be almost like in a trance, like state, as he was doing this, stretching routine. And I didn't want to disrupt it. So I didn't know what to do. I just kind of stood there, and I didn't want to say, "Hey, Ed, are you ready?" So
where was this course in journalism school, Kevin? Come on.
Yeah, they don't teach you that. Yeah, and I am a college professor, and I don't teach this story. So anyway, I just turned around and walked out, and I basically counted 1,000 Mississippis, and then I went back in the room. By then, he was standing at his locker, and he and I talked muscle cars and barracudas and everything else, and I got a really good story out of it. But I haven't been unnerved too many times in my career, but that was the time. I
can't imagine you. I can't imagine and you are like so even in the locker rooms. Whenever I see you're just so completely there, and I just can't imagine. I'm sure you kept even. I'm sure you did your thing. You kept.
Yeah, I did. I didn't bring it up. I didn't say, "Hey,
hey, by the way,
do you always stretch in the nude or like what?" Yeah. It was a funny story. So I'm guessing he just had taken a shower and thought I needed to stretch out something, and he just plopped down and did it. So, but anyway, that's
great. I love it. I've got one too. So it takes place when I was a child. Basically, I was I'm gonna say I was 13 years old, and my friend David Katz at the time had tickets in the season tickets, and it was like third row up, and he was friends with somehow through this is when Daryl Sittler was a Flyer for that brief period of time, and when they wore the dark long pants that period of time. So I went to a game with him, and apparently his mom was going to come and pick us up, and then apparently I don't even remember how this happened. I think we were supposed to call his mom or something like that at the end of the game. This is before cell phones. We were supposed to call his mom, and then he was somewhere else. She would come there. So we call his mom, and he's like, "Oh, don't worry. Daryl Sittler is going to drive you guys home." Now he had just scored 2 goals in the game. I'm like, okay,
wow,
that's pretty exciting. So my sister, he's like, "Oh, and he knows, your sister or your friend's sister." I want to say ex-sister or whatever. He knows your sister. All right, so I'm okay. All right, that's crazy. Well, remember his son who played and was drafted in the first round. What was his name? Brandon Sittler, or I can't remember.
No, it was Ryan.
Ryan Sittler, right? So he was in school with my sister. Like he was the same age in high school. They lived in our area. So Ryan knew that, and one of Dave's brothers was also in school with him, I think. So the Sittlers and the Katzes knew each other. I didn't know that, but they, his father was like a big judge too. So there was all kinds of things going on. So anyway, so we wait, and Sittler had 2 goals that game. He was the first star of the game. It was really exciting. So we sit there and we're waiting outside by the Bobby Clark statue for him to come out and meet us and take us to his car. So he comes out with his wife, beautiful blonde woman, I think Wendy Sittler. I don't forget what her name was exactly, but Nancy Sittler maybe. I don't know. Anyways, he comes out with his wife on his arm. He's as happy as could be because he scored the 2 goals, and he's got a beer in the other hand. He's like, "Oh, you guys, I'm going to take him. No worries. Hop in the car." So we hop in this big giant Cadillac in the back seat, and it's just the most beautiful car I've ever been in. It's like I'm in a moving hotel, and his wife slides over, and he puts his arm around her, puts the beer down, and drives us home. Every time we stop taking a swig of beer, back your wife. I mean, this is the 80s, right? So. And we got home safely and everything like that. But so I got home and my mom knew this happened. And because obviously David Katz's mom had called her. And so she was like excited to meet him too, maybe or whatever. So she was happy for 11 o'clock at night. My mom was out like raking leaves, which made no sense whatsoever. But she's out there raking leaves till the car pulls up. And she goes over and says, "Thank you very much for bringing my son home." And that was it. That was my gist. So yeah, it was a crazy time. Just bizarre, He's a legend. He's absolutely a legend, obviously, in Toronto and Hockey Hall of Famer, and he drove me home when I was a kid. So that's a good one.
That's pretty incredible. Yeah,
I know. It's just the odds guy,
I've got another bizarre one, and it was during the playoffs. I think it was actually during the finals too. And it's one of those things where you don't think about it at the time, but it was at a period when teams were a little more forthright about injuries than they are now. So it was the early 1990s. It was when Minnesota North Stars were in the final against the Pittsburgh Penguins, and in the game notes they would list why each player is out. The Minnesota North Stars did. And I just pulled out a game notes. I had to do a little thing where it's just a little capsule box. Right. And for Stuart Gavin was out of the lineup, and they listed in parentheses, bleeding in the testicles. And so I wrote in the little box, Stuart Gavin out, bleeding, in parentheses, bleeding in the testicles. And I ran into Stuart in the next day, and he goes, "Kevin," he said, "my mom reads your paper." And he said, "You can't put that in there." And I looked at him and I said, I really didn't give it any thought, but I'm sorry. I probably shouldn't have put that in there. I just wasn't, thinking. I mean, in today's HIPAA laws, I really shouldn't have.
Well, that was a tool that weren't even existing, and you're just reporting what you're given.
I mean, it really was in the game notes. I mean,
if it's in the game notes,
it wasn't like I was, getting a scoop.
Didn't everybody write about it?
I don't know. I don't remember. It wasn't that, big of a deal. But
that's not a fun thing to have, and that's got to be something that he must have thought it was pretty funny too. He must have.
He was lighthearted about it.
Yeah, he was
for sure. But I mean, it was a great. Certainly, it's something that he brought up. That's what he said. My mother reads your paper. The best Stanley Cup story I have too involves actually the great Tom McMillan, who was a former writer in Pittsburgh who covered the Penguins, then became the vice president of the Penguins, worked in their PR, was also in radio. But he and I had gone to Sherlock Holmes bar, which was right across the street from the Westin Hotel during the playoffs. And it's where, you would actually run into general managers from other teams as well. It was sort of a hockey hangout, and all of us had sort of closed the place down, and everybody was going home at different times, and some people were going out to breakfast. And Tom and I were, walking. It wasn't a great distance, maybe 40 yards, if that, up to the Westin, and we were tacking on the way back. You know how they're going up, across, and in and down, and we come in, and of course back then they used to just bring the Stanley Cup in. It was really no big deal. It was on display in the Western Hotel, and
Yeah.
it was, it had those ropes around it, the
Yeah.
sort of felt 70s prom style looking plush
It still has that kind of
ropes
look
around
to
it. And there was like a 15-year-old kid in a bellhop or a 16-year-old, in charge of sort of watching over. It was 2:00 in the morning. And so Tom and I, wander in and we say to the 15-year-old, hey, can we, we're reporters looking, we got our credential. Can we just look at the cup? He goes, yeah. He says, take it over there. So Tom and I go over and we sit on 2 chairs and
You
we
guys
got the cup there. And we're looking at it, inspecting it, and we didn't lift it over our heads or anything that violate the kind of spirit. But we we gave it a good inspection and looked at it, and was struck by the weight of it, and that sort of thing. And then just took it back and handed it to the kid. We put it back inside the ropes, and I'm thinking, there's just no way in today modern world you would ever get that close.
That's one of those moments when you're thinking, if me as a child knew I was going to be doing this right now, if I told my child, I went back in time and said, you're going to get to do this, they'd be like, no.
Yeah, that's right. So, it's interesting though. I always think about this, and I bet there are others out there that were like me. Whenever I was watching hockey games on Hockey Night in Canada, because I grew up in the Detroit area, which means I had Channel 9, which means I had Hockey Night in Canada, and
for sure,
Dave Hodge and all that. When I was a kid and you were watching, the Red Wings were never in it. So I was always watching the Maple Leafs and the Canadians, and, the Canadians were so dominant and everything, and I got to overtime. Who do you think I rooted for in the overtime games? Who did I want to win?
The Red Wings, right?
No, well, they were never in those games, but I really didn't root for a team. So I was preparing to be a journalist.
Oh, you were preparing all the time. You never rooted. You just wanted to see it.
Yeah, but what did I root for? I wanted long overtimes. I was disappointed when teams would score early.
I still feel that way. And I remember one time being with you in the press box and saying, isn't this great? And you're like, this has to end.
Yeah, well, it's a little bit different when you're
a journalist. You've got a deadline. I'm of course an internet blogger. I don't have a deadline, so I'm like, this is amazing.
Yeah, well, in the old newspaper days, like at certain points, it was over for you. You could close your computer because you'd be sitting next to the Washington Post, and then midnight would come, and then the Washington Post. And I'm totally making this up. It wasn't these specific papers, but what I'm saying is, like the Washington Post deadline, it would be 10 after 12, and then 12:15 comes down. He closes his computer and said, "Well, I'm done." And then next, the Philadelphia Inquirer was saying, "Yeah, I got till 12:55," and then that would pass, and he'd shut his computer and says, "Well, I'm out." And you'd kind of go down the line. That's how it worked. Now there's never any deadlines.
So everything's always
you're just always on, and you're on the internet. And
do you remember what you would say to me every time I would meet you in the press box and I would say, who's going to win tonight?
And I don't remember.
It would always be the same thing. It would always be the same exact thing.
Yeah.
Whatever's the most inconvenient thing for me.
Oh yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, no, that was actually a Al Strachan thing.
Right, it was.
Would always say, whatever will inconvenience the greatest number of journalists will occur. Yeah, that's kind of what he always said. I remember the night of the delayed game, the lights went out in Boston.
Yeah.
Bill Beacon, who worked for the Canadian Press, was sitting next to me, and I said to him, he was starting to write his lead. Now, he was a wire service guy, so he had to write his lead ahead of time. That's just the way it works. You got to get ready.
Yeah.
It's almost immediate. You got to get it up.
Yeah.
And I said, don't you for a minute write that lead. You're going to screw everything up. And he wrote his lead. And, of course, the lights went out. And, the whole thing was thing. And for years, when I'd see him, I said, still all your fault, Bill.
All your fault. I know. Yeah. I totally get that.
Yeah, you don't. Yeah, you can't write your leads,
Yeah, that's crazy. I have seen people write, and I'm sure you've seen this too, like write 2 endings to a story. Like that's
for sure. Yeah, we've all
done you did all the time. Like you just anticipating. But the last thing, and you're probably going to hate me for sharing this, but and it's nothing terrible. It's just a little embarrassing for both of us. Goes back to Boston. You know where we're going to go with this?
I am. Yeah, you promised you would never bring this up. So
Can I bring it up? Not. Can I bring it up? I won't if you don't want
oh
me to.
yeah, no, go ahead.
Okay, so this is the Vancouver Bruins series, and it was in Boston, and we had a day off in between games. And Kevin and I were like secretly fans of the show Glee. You know, we liked it. We liked, it was big at that time, and so we're there in Boston, nothing to do, and they that night between games in the Boston and TD Garden there was a Glee live concert. So I called up Kevin. I don't even know how to react when I asked you, "Hey, let's you and I get tickets to go to see Glee live." And you're like, "Okay,
yeah, yeah, we did." And I remember talking to my daughters about that, thinking, and they just thought I was the greatest, guy of all time. That I would. You saw it live, yeah.
Yeah, no, everybody loved everybody.
Yeah, it was Eklund and me, and then 14,500 screaming teenage girls,
basically.
Yeah.
So we were like sitting as these two like obviously not in place. They all had like white shirts with things written on them. Everybody's sitting around us, and we're just looking at each other. We're like, "This is insane!" Like we are obviously. Which one of these does not?
Well, it was really two shows. It was what was going on in the stage, and then for us, it was what was going on in the stands. Like you just watched, and it was just. I mean, it was a cultural phenomenon.
It was a cultural phenomenon, and it was fun. I mean, I had a good time with it, but just but we just couldn't think about what was this whole thing. And we said, and I promised I would never talk about it again, and here I am putting it out.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Well, I'll tell one other story too that was kind of funny because Eklund had just started out covering hockey, and of course by then I had been doing it already 150 years. Right. We got to talking about he had been watching practice.
I know
diligently watching practice.
Yeah.
And we put in. I don't even remember who the particulars are. Maybe I will remember, but like who was going to play goal for the Oilers?
Maybe Markstrom.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't really matter for the story. He had watched who it was, and he had decided. He wrote his thing about who he thought was going to play goal, based on how they practiced,
right,
and how they were in the thing. Yeah, they were being used by the coach and all that because he had experience, in goaltending, and he sort of knew all that. And I had gotten it right. And Eklund said, "Well, what was your thought process on it?" And I said, I found the Edmonton Oilers beat writer who I know real well, Jim Matheson, and I asked him who's starting in goal, and he told me, and so I wrote it.
I was right. If they would have won the Stanley Cup if they had gone my way, because he was the better goalie. It was Markstrom and whoever else. Edmonton had these two goalies that shouldn't have even been there by that point in the Stanley Cup Finals. I remember. I forget who else was Markstrom and Dwayne Rollison. That's who it was. Yeah. And it was that series versus Calgary, and they were going back and forth a little bit. And I'm like, Markstrom looks way better.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but that, just goes to show you that experience matters even in journalism. And, the way I viewed it is Jim Matheson have covered the Oilers dating back to the WHA.
It's a pretty good thing.
To the WHA.
It's probably better than my eyes. Yeah.
Rather than guessing, I just said, according to Jim Matheson, who's been covering this team since dating back to the WHA.
The really fun thing about this is not that you said all that stuff, but I stuck with my story. Like and we basically went to like the game. I'm like, I'm going to get this. They're going to start Markstrom. And you're like, no.
Yeah.
I talk to somebody, they're not. I'm like, no, he's way better. And I stuck to it right to the end. I stuck to it. So yeah, all right, so we're going to get out of here. But one thing I want to talk about before we get out of here is something that we're going to do in the future. And I think it's going to be fun sometimes Kevin's on the air. So we need your help though. We need your help out there. And people in the chat room, you'd be great about this. So what we want to do is we want to have some of you on. And there's a podcast I listen to called Judge John Hodgman. If you get a chance to listen to it, it's brilliant. John Hodgman, you probably remember him from certain different things. He was like when there was that commercial, I'm a Mac, I'm a PC. He was a PC guy. He's got like dark rim glasses and all that. He's freaking hilarious. Anyway, he's doing the Daily Show with Jon Stewart. So what he does is he gets people to come on his podcast, and he's the judge, and he settles like petty disputes. So there's a lot of hockey stuff out there. A lot of questions that always go on. So if you and your friend or anybody you know or have a long time dispute, maybe it's this player versus that player, maybe it's maybe it's trapezoid versus not trapezoid. What we'd like you to do is just email me at eklund@hockeybuzz.com and write the dispute out. and I will, if I like it, then and when you think you can do it, we'll have you on the show. We'll have you on the podcast, and you guys can debate your side. Kevin and I will kind of lead it. I'll be like the bailiff. I'll be here too. I'll help out, but it mainly will be Kevin listening to your stuff, and then at the end giving his decision. So this is what we're gonna do, and I think it'll be a lot of fun. And we might do it. We might start it off with like maybe me and Kevin Gibson doing something, and Kevin Allen being the judge, or something like that. So, which and have fun with it, so you guys can see what it's like. But just email Eklund@hockeybuzz.com and put Kevin Allen in your topic, in your subject. Just put Kevin Allen or Judge Kevin or whatever, something like that, and we will have the Judge Kevin Allen show, which will be so much fun. I mean, here's a guy who's in the Hall of Fame as a writer. It's just, and he's been around for the show. And Kevin is the most honest person. Like, he's direct, as I've learned, because I've learned a lot lately. He's very direct, and he it's just great, So, and he'll say it as it is. So he'll have his own opinions too, but he'll listen to your arguments. So let's do this. And so just email me, and that'll be great. So that's all. Hope you can kill the next 4.5 hours now until game time. Remember, without the buzz, this is just hockey, and enjoy. I mean, I'm going to take a second. I just kind of logs out, so I'm playing. So enjoy the games tonight, guys. We will see you very soon. And